Let's see, it says that we're recording up there, and Amanda, let's see, we've got, I assume that we're good to go. Hey, Hillary, I can't see you, but I know you're here. We're gonna go ahead and start because it's the thing to do with the Zoom meetings, is to start on time and end on time. And folks hopefully will be jumping in as we go along. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Amy Takahashi. I'm the Director of Children's Ministries at Highland United Methodist Church. And I'm happy that we are able to present this program this evening in cooperation with NAMI. This has been a topic that we've batted around in the children's team for quite a while now. And as the pandemic unfolded and people were schooling at home and at home with their children all the time, it seemed like it was more of an issue. And parents certainly feel stressed, but we see our children, how they experience stress. So Amy Robertson is with us tonight. Amy, we're so glad you're here. And she's going to be talking with us a little bit about some strategies in recognizing symptoms of stress and anxiety in our kids. Amy is on the board for NAMI, which is the National Alliance for Mental Illness. I get that right?
Yes, ma'am.
She's on the, and what she does for Wake County NAMI is she coordinates their a class called the NAMI Basics. It's a class for parents of teenagers, and helping them recognize and deal with mental health issues with their kids. I think I got that right. But professionally, Amy has her own human resources consulting firm, Soul Advantage, and she brings just lots of personal expertise to this tonight. And Amy, we're just so glad you're here. And just a quick side note, Amanda Bunce is here tonight also silently as our executive producer. So Amanda, thank you for keeping us running smoothly. Amy is going to do about 30 or 35 minutes of presentation, I think.
Might be a little longer, but we'll see how fast we can get through it.
Yeah, and she'll be sharing her screen and sharing some slides with us. We are recording, and afterwards the recording will be available, as well as we will have a PDF of her slides available as well. So don't worry about getting it all down. You can get it later. We will have time for questions and answers at the end. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Amy. Thanks for being here.
Oh, my goodness. Well, thank you, Amy and Amanda and Highland United Methodist Church, for this opportunity to present what we can through NAMI and drive awareness and education for other parents. And thank you all for joining us tonight to talk about stress and anxiety. It's a timely topic. And I was asked a couple of weeks ago in another webinar, what gives me hope during this time? And the biggest thing that gives me hope is the fact that we're all starting to talk about stress and anxiety and mental health. And, we're trying to talk about things. We're lifting the veil. We are being more open and trying to drive that stigma away. And so what we do know, before I start sharing my slides, is early intervention is the key to a better prognosis. So the earlier that we as parents can identify unusual patterns or signs within our children and course correct or help them develop the tools in their toolbox to deal with stress, the better. And so that's why I'm really passionate about sharing topics like this, especially now. But I also will say, I'm a parent too. I'm a parent of an 18 and a 21-year-old, so they're adults now, but they still need me. And one of my children has been diagnosed with several mental health disorders in the past when she was 12. And one of those was generalized anxiety disorder. So I have a lot of lived experience in the stress and anxiety area. and I hope that you learned something tonight, or we can point you to the right resources. All right, with that, I think I can share my screen now. And we will go into it. So I'm assuming you all can see it because I can see me in the upper right-hand corner. If you can't, let me know. And here we go. So we've got a lot to talk about tonight, and Amy gave a great introduction, and thank you. We are going to just throw a lot of information out there. A lot of it, you know, as parents, you all are the CEOs of your kids' lives. So you're probably already aware of some of these things or concepts that I'll be talking about. Some of the concepts will be just sharing a little bit of data around stress and anxiety, very high level, very minimal. The difference between stress and anxiety, we use those words interchangeably. Do we know the difference? So let's talk about that. Words do matter. We're going to spend a lot of our time focusing on stress. So what causes stress? What does your body do when you are stressed? What are some coping techniques? And then what are some practices for you as parents to take home, some homework to practice on how to help your children cope? And then we'll talk about when to get help and local resources. One of the things that I do want to say, because I haven't said that yet, is a disclaimer. I'm a mom. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. So I'm presenting information as a mom and as a mental health advocate. So I probably won't know any of the questions if it is relating to physiological things beyond my speaking points. And I wouldn't want to mislead you there anyway. But there's lots of great references. And at the bottom of each slide, I tried to reference where I got the data so that you can keep looking up on your own and learning more and more. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, wait, before we get started, let's take a little bit of time to relax a little. It's Sunday night, we're getting prepared for the week. So did you know, let's see, today it's August 23rd. August 15th was actually National Relaxation Day. And I like to think of these holidays, these offbeat or, you know, national holidays, because I think it's kind of fun to complete the sentence. So I thought if you wanted to, let's have a little fun, because little Sean Muller in 1985 actually created this national holiday. So he felt like, you know, with all of his chores, there was nothing better, that we all needed a break. So in honor of National Relaxation Day, I'd love for you to practice your chat feature and put in there, when I relax, I like to blank, 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 dot, dot, dot. What do you like to do? And I'll put mine in there too. So we'll take a sec to do that. Okay, so I'm seeing some good answers. Lots of Netflix and Hallmark movies. Be outside. That's been a blessing, I think, in the past several months, is to be able to be outside. So it's good. I mean, the whole point here is knowing what you like to do. Where do you go? What do you do to recharge? Thanks for sharing all of that. I like to go to the beach. I like to read. I like to walk, and I like to be outside as well. Okay. All right, here we're going to start getting into a few graphs here. This slide represents stress in America between 2007 and 2014. And one thing you can see about these lines is like, okay, from 2007 to 2014, I can tell you that our stress levels wound up going down. In fact, in 2007 on a 10-point scale, it was 6.2. And then in 2014, it was 4.9. So we were going in the right direction. And the top stressors were money, work, family responsibilities, and health concerns were one of the lowest, if you can believe that. So let's go and take a look at now. Stress levels in America. So this is the same survey just done in 2020 instead of 2015. And I've just pulled out the parent versus non-parent stress levels. And if you take a look at, you know, back in 2014, the stress, I mentioned the stress level was around 4.9 on a 10-point scale in general. Well, this slide shows that we're back up to a 5.5 for non-parents, but 6.7 for parents. So, you know, related to coronavirus, we are experiencing some stress here. Money continues to be one of the biggest stressors. And if you look at the sources of stress as a result of pandemic, and this is with regards to parents, you can see what people are a little stressed out about, right? And it's probably a lot of things that have crossed your mind over the last 5 to 6 months as well. You know, getting sick, a family member getting sick. What are we going to do about school? You know, school just started back for many in the past week. What's the government doing, if anything, to help us? How do we manage distance learning? And then are we missing out on something? Is my son or daughter missing a major milestone in school, or am I, or whatever? So that's what, you know, COVID has given us here is, you know, a return of some stress levels, and one of the, you know, having health back up as one of the highest concerns. So let's talk about anxiety now. And this is, I promise, my last graph slide, because I don't really want to put you to sleep this early. This slide shows the prevalence of any anxiety disorder among adolescents. So you can see that the prevalence is higher with females versus males. And you can see the prevalence across the age groups is pretty tight. But an estimated 32% of adolescents had any anxiety disorder within their lifetime. So we're talking about a really important subject. So I mentioned we're going to be talking about the difference between stress and anxiety, because sometimes they're used interchangeably. And even though stress and anxiety share many of the same emotional and physical symptoms, they originate from very different places. So stress was a term created back in the 1930s by a person named Hans Selye, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's basically the reaction of your body after some sort of change, a demand for change. And he believed that stress could be good or bad. And stress provides, on the good side of the coin, provides motivation for the individual to adjust to the stressor that's being introduced. So, you know, the way you look at how you might solve a problem. So if you've heard of what's called the DSM-5, and that's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and you can get it off of Amazon, but that's how, that's the criteria by mental health disorder. for diagnosis. It also defines stress as a pattern of specific responses and sometimes non-specific responses a person makes in reaction to an event that disturbs his or her equilibrium. So here, really, stress is response to an external cause, but anxiety is really more the specific person's reaction to stress. So it's viewed as an internal view. Stress is typically temporary and situational. So once the situation passes, then stress levels go down. But anxiety winds up being sustained, longer, focused on the future, a feeling of dread and apprehension, especially in situations that aren't really threatening. So anxiety is more of a personalization, and anxiety is a reaction or can be a symptom of extreme stress. Okay, so we're going to keep talking about Hans Selye's belief in good stress and bad stress. And here's where, a little bit more physiology comes into place. So what good stress winds up being a stimulant, and bad stress becomes a burden. And, what defines the good or bad stress is really our ability to manage or cope with it, right? Is it within our control? So as far as your body does respond to stress internally. There's a lot of things that happen when when your body senses something new or something that could be threatening or stressful. Thanks to the work of our sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight takes over when we're stressed, and stress winds up causing the body to release neurotransmitters, and those are just chemical messengers, and hormones, which are more like signaling molecules. So stress really causes the brain to release that noradrenaline, which is a neurotransmitter. And what it does is it just helps you to communicate smoothly if you have the right amount and you make these neural connections. And then you may have heard people talk about cortisol. That is, and they call that the stress hormone. It causes, your body releases that, your adrenal glands release that during stress. And so it can cause an increase in your heart rate, your blood pressure. The right amount of cortisol is good. Too much cortisol messes with your immune system, increases your blood pressure, and can lead to other health conditions that aren't so good. And when you see stress or feel stress, you wind up, the same symptoms apply to both fear and excitement. So your body really doesn't know how to process it, but they're secreting these things. But the key to dealing with stress and putting it either into the bad stress bucket or the good stress bucket is something called reframing, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. But reframing means you're just turning this stimulus or thing that's happening to you into a challenge instead of a threat. And so it's the way you're thinking about it. Your body can help you train yourself to build up your stress response system, just like you can help build your immune system. Okay, generally, when are we most vulnerable to stress? And, think about yourself. Lots of times you probably already know these, right? We're not eating right, we're not exercising, we've had some major life change, we are not sleeping well. And I want to pause for a second and talk about the lack of social support or loneliness. I think in the last 5 months, as we are dealing with, safety and security in our day-to-day lives, we've been more isolated. And social support has been proven to be a greater prediction of happiness than any other factor. People who wind up having really strong relationships are less likely to perceive situations in a stressful way in the first place. And then people who invest in their social support systems, right? So you have a person or persons that will build you up and help you through these types of stresses. They're able to better thrive under difficult circumstances. So there's science to prove that this having stronger connections, especially through this isolation or social distancing that we're feeling, will lead to less stress and being less vulnerable to stress. Okay, we're going to shift to children now. This is a list. It's not full of every single thing on the list, but here are a few things. Your children, probably depending on their age and development, they experience stress from many different things. So you can see ranges from separation anxiety, academic pressures, changes in your family or being worried about what's going on in your family, social media or social pressures, the pandemic, world news, overhearing some news that you may be discussing with a parent, a grandparent, another child. Sometimes the little ones, a scary movie or book, being overscheduled. So think about what you've been noticing with your children as triggers to stress. Some triggers wind up being bigger in your household versus other households. So for example, and different triggers at different ages. So, when my daughter was, younger, and I would say elementary school age, she was really worried about what was going on in the family. If my husband or I were talking about, we were discussing a critical topic and she thought we were being, arguing, but we weren't arguing. But she was always worried, oh no, you're arguing, you might get a divorce, right? That was kind of her impending, stress, gloom and doom. And then as she wound up getting into middle school, social pressures and social media wound up really taking over and fitting in. And then when she got into high school, the social pressures were still there, but then the academic pressures came because she was worried about getting into university and going to study at the place she wanted to study and the topic she wanted. So all that to say, it looks a little different based on each child. These are pretty common causes. And, depending on their developmental or their age, it may look different as well. Okay, when you see a child exhibit stress symptoms, you're going to see them, you can see one or more of these behaviors or physical signs when you observe it. I remember getting a stomach ache the morning of my school pictures when I was growing up. It was awful, and I would hate that. And then I remember also getting a stomach ache or a headache during major class trips, like field trips, and I would be so worried even through high school, and so bad that I would wind up not even going, So your body will experience these symptoms, and physiologically they will exhibit these symptoms because we just spent a slide or two talking about what hormones and what neurotransmitter your body is secreting during stress. Additionally, behaviors, you will see that. I remember my son, when my daughter was born, he was completely potty trained, and then he regressed after she was born. And, what I didn't realize then was that he was regressing due to stress. His family situation had changed. And so these things will happen. So here's a few examples of that, changes in academic performance, developing a nervous habit, biting your fingernails, clearing your throat often, things like that. Trouble with concentration. So think of these items and what have you been experiencing within your household and your family. I mean, these are even helpful for me living with my husband and an adult now, is just to know, I can tell when he's been stressed over something, and usually he winds up with some sort of appetite change or fatigue, or he winds up being really non-talkative, whereas normally he talks a lot more and is a little more outgoing. Okay, what can we do to help our children cope through stressful times? And we're going to talk about these 5 bullets here: conversation, calming strategies, simplifying schedules, having good distractions, and modeling healthy behavior. I want to share something that my mother taught me, or said to me, the day that I brought my son home from the hospital, our first child, and she had come to Raleigh from Winston-Salem to spend a week with us and to be that extra set of hands for me and my emotional support. And I remember her words of wisdom, and she said, "Today is the most dependent Evan will ever be on you. And your job as a parent is to love him and encourage his independence." And boy, was she so right. And he's 21 now. So being able to provide your children with strategies for helping them cope with stress is teaching them how to be independent. You're not solving the problem for them, but you're helping them develop critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, and practicing, just good decision making. And when we experience, some sort of event or compression that knocks us down, we wind up being forever changed. And so, you can stay down or you can do something about it. And so what I like about, these coping mechanisms or strategies is you actually have actions to take that will help. And so we're going to talk also a little bit about ourselves as well as we go through this, because you've got to have a good handle on yourself before you can help others. So let's start and let's talk a little bit about conversation. The earlier that you can begin regular, open, and honest dialogue with your child, the smoother the conversations will go as they get older. Spending time in conversation with your child gives them a safe place to explore and expel any feelings that they have. You know, what we recommend is asking open-ended questions, listening, being able to reflect back to them what you heard, discuss what's causing stress. But when you listen, also don't react, don't overreact. Don't get angry or frustrated. What you're trying to do is show your child that you're a safe space to talk about feelings and to talk about problem solving. I would say that from a conversation perspective, you know, there's a location, you know, the right time and the right place is very important. And you may not be able to just schedule something. You know, you may not be able to just say, hey, Evan, let's sit down and have a conversation. That might work. But building that muscle over time, I've learned that sometimes my best conversations with my children have been in the car on the way to activities, at night before, you know, we wind up turning the lights out to go to sleep. So I think you take cues from your family norms on what's the right place and time for communication to talk to your child. And don't just have a conversation about the good stuff. Also talk a little bit about what's on their mind, and that will help them. And if they're not ready to talk with you about, you know, things that might be stressful, I would also encourage them to talk to other trusted adults. Okay, calming strategies. This seems kind of like a no-brainer, right? You know, being able to apply calming strategies to react to the physiological behavior, physiological symptoms of stress is very helpful. And so there's a lot of different ways you can do this. You know, my mother taught me breathing exercises very young because she would share that she would be doing her breathing exercises when she would get a little bit stressed or had something that, you know, a problem that came out of left field that she wasn't quite equipped to handle. But all of these things where you can limit screen time, and these days it's very hard to do that, but stretching, exercise, even just some fresh air would be helpful here. Okay, simplifying schedules. There's so much pressure these days to go and do constantly, even while we're quarantining or staying at home. We're doing things in a different way, right? So we may be on Zoom meetings, or we may be, you know, having to do our studying at home and blending that home and work. So, you know, once you start having good conversations with your child, you know, this is one of the things that you should be talking to them about is, you know, reviewing their activities and involvements, asking their opinion on, you know, what are they interested in? Are they still interested in doing them? Are there any must-haves, things that are non-negotiable for you that you need them to do or that they need to do? And then what are the things that are just kind of added extra and they can say no to if it's, or yes to, depending on the day. I also like having a structured day or structured week, especially for the younger child. Structure does not mean complicated. Structure can be simplified, and you'll just have to work on a schedule that best fits the style of your family and the needs. Make sure that you always have this playtime or relaxation time. Make it important to you and your significant other, your partner, and make sure it's important to your children. And then help prioritize them. If you see them exhibiting some symptoms of stress, and you think it's probably as a result of, their demands from day to day, then talk about what are the priorities and what are the things that they can push off. And then there's always the good distractions, right? One of the things that helped my daughter tremendously with her anxiety and depression was volunteerism and helping others. And, she wound up helping others on a farm. Her passion was animals. So she wasn't necessarily volunteering, to put together at the soup kitchen or whatever. She was at the farm feeding the animals and taking care of them. But doing something for someone else was a big key in lowering stress levels. Just laughing, having game nights, being silly. Don't forget that, the world and life is full of the mundane, and you have to find joy in the mundane. And a lot of times the joy in the mundane comes through humor and laughter. And then creative outlets. This is a really good time, especially under stressful periods, to try some sort of new creative activity. All right, modeling healthy behavior. We're going to spend a few minutes here because as parents, we are our children's first teachers. They watch our behaviors and they know what we do when we are stressed out. And if you don't believe me, ask your child what happens when mom or dad gets worried or stressed, and they will likely be able to tell you what happens. So we all need to model good coping strategies. So, I want for you all to reflect on, what are your go-to strategies? What do you like to go to the gym, knit, do a crossword puzzle? The next time you yourself wind up using your coping skill, share it with your children. Say, hey y'all, I need a timeout. I need a break. I'm going to go, re-energize by knitting or whatever that is, taking a walk around the block. I think that, being able to show your child that you are able to observe that you're feeling stressed and then take a break, a pause, and then walk away and go do something to recharge is very important, because there's always going to be stress, but it's how we manage it. And the earlier your child can learn, the better. And accepting that you can't prevent stress, and that some stress is beneficial, and stress can be an opportunity to grow, is really more of an optimism or growth mindset. If you don't have this optimism or growth mindset and exhibit it, it's going to be pretty impossible to help teach your kid those skill sets. So the best thing, that if you're not one that can respond favorably or optimistically or in a positive way as an opportunity to stress, then I think it's time for you to start doing some reflecting and practicing for yourself. So there are a few things here, right? Being optimistic, adopting that stress help thinking. Your body language also says a lot about you, so be in control of that. One of my personal favorites is don't be so hard on yourself. We're all experiencing this weirdness going on today. And, you know, we all have different types of things that are impacting us. Don't be hard on yourself. Try not to be hard on others. Extend grace. So, you know, don't go on a Facebook rant when you're frustrated. That's teaching your child something, right? We've talked about sharing your strategy out loud and, you know, focus on first things first. Focus on the things that really matter. Don't be distracted by things that will slow you down or deflate you. Okay, so we've talked about the things that the things you can do to help your children cope with anxiety. But now, this will probably be more helpful to you as I provide you with the slide deck for you to take home and read or reflect back on. But I'm going to give you 4 areas of practice or homework that I'd like you to work on for this. Reframing, listening skills, the CPS approach, and calming techniques. So we'll start with reframing. So reframing stress. Remember our discussion earlier about the good stress and the bad stress and what happens to your body. The key is reframing that stress as a challenge instead of a stress. So accepting you can't prevent stress, it's an opportunity. The language you use to describe the stressor is important. You can either, you know, say, I can't believe I have to create this presentation. Or you can say, I'm looking forward to creating this presentation because I'm going to learn something, right? Those are 2 different ways to view pulling together a presentation that could be stressful. Take time to understand your child's stress from their perspective rather than dismiss it. Spend time being vulnerable with your children around stress can be good and what you can learn, that you can learn from it. Share your stories of when you've learned from your stress. Put it in words appropriate for the level of your child or their age. And then help your child as they do find or identify stresses in their life. Help them find areas for growth because you want to teach them or help them develop resiliency through, you know, growing through challenges so that you end up wiser and stronger. And you can build resiliency. We can create or lose energy by how we do this. Our neurological systems are highly, highly adaptive, and the plasticity of our brain, we're able to learn so much. So the more you reframe, the more you view it as an opportunity and in a positive light, the better chances are that you're going to develop some resilience, some problem solving, and be able to attack the next stressor in a way that might be a little bit easier or use that experience. So a lot of what we've already talked about requires good listening skills, and good listening skills, you know, don't just have to do with your children or your family. You know, if you are a good listener, you're going to experience some major benefits. You know, you could be a great, effective conversation partner. It's going to help you build trust with the person you're listening to. You're going to be able to show empathy to them and show the person that you're fully engaged. It helps you practice patience, believe it or not. And it also, you know, will just continue that interest and help you move from acquaintances to being more deep friend. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about how you practice that. Okay, back in 1957, Carl Rogers and Richard Farson created this concept of active listening. So over the next week, I want you to practice. It doesn't just have to be your children, but anybody. When you're talking to someone about a topic in a conversation, these are the steps I'd like you to take. Pay attention with no distraction. This is your body language, and you're going to, and your complete attention. Look them in the eye. Don't interrupt, or try not to interrupt. Observe their body language, and then your body language. How are you turning? How are you moving in? More than 6 feet, of course. Restate what the person said in your own language. So really that's a lot of what active listening or reflective responses are, is when someone says something, and usually it's something, that's causing a little bit of passion or emotion, be able to restate it back to them with the same feeling and emotion in your own language. And then ask clarifying questions to dig in a little bit more. And then once you're done with the conversation, think about it. Was it hard to do this? Was it easy to do this? What should I probably do the next time? And when specifically when you're talking to children or kids, teenagers, number 4 is super important. When kids often respond to stress with catastrophic thinking. And so when this happens, your ability to respond in a way that is reflective and as an opportunity will be very helpful. So, for example, your child may say, if I fail this test, my life is ruined. And then you might respond, if you're using reflective responses or active listening, you might say, I understand you're feeling nervous about your algebra test, right? That's exactly, you're trying to let them know you've heard them and you've heard their feeling. Acknowledge that this is the reality of your child's lived experience. It's not really, what's true to you. You may think that it's not of great concern, but to them, for them to have mentioned it, it's of, very important to them and perceived as a stress. So the asking the clarifying questions and number 5 is helpful because you can start this exercise of talking about the extremes, and we're going to talk about the extremes in the next practice. But some of the things that I might ask are, what's the worst thing that could happen here? And what would you do if it happens? And then what's the best outcome that could happen? And what would you do, or what would you do if it happens, right? So they're kind of creating the extremes and getting them to think a little bit deeper about the consequences to the potential stressor. So this leads us into our next practice, which is an approach by Dr. Ross Greene, and it's a book. It's been written a while back called The Explosive Child. It was a great book, but he outlines, a collaborative and proactive way to work with your child on solutions. So we'll talk through that a little bit. It seems kind of obvious. Again, a lot of these things are more intuitive than others, but basically in collaborative and proactive solutions, you are developing plans in collaboration with your child or your teenager, and this can be plans around anything. In this case, we're talking about stress. So being proactive about observing behaviors, symptoms, physiological symptoms in response to stress, identifying some patterns there, and then having great communication with your child and having built that foundation, being able to have a conversation with them about creating these plan A, plan B, or plan C's. And so on the last slide, we talked about starting to ask the questions of your child. Let's talk about what's the best thing that could happen. What's the worst thing that could happen? What would you do? And then really CPS tries to get you to drive towards something that might be a little more realistic in the middle. And you can think of it kind of like the Goldilocks approach. And we teach this in our basics class as well with NAMI, Wake County. So the first thing is to developing that plan B is, expressing empathy, using active listening skills. Say, I hear you, let's do this together. Is something going on I might not understand? Defining the problem, let them define what they see as the stressor. And then, only then, after they've talked about it, then you can share your perspective and your thoughts on that. And then invite them to collaborate with you. How can we make this better? Let's do this together. What are your thoughts? This approach and being collaborative with your child helps them understand and learn the process that we're doing this problem solving with them, not to them. So we're giving them a little bit of respect. We're building closer, more personal relationships with them. And, our kids are more likely to cooperate if they've had a part in developing the solution. So collaborating doesn't mean that you're placing responsibility for solving the problem primarily on your child's shoulder, but what it really just means you're doing it as a team. And then once you've thought about some of the solutions or plans, then you can start thinking about positive and negative consequences of each of the ideas. Okay. The fun stuff is the calming techniques. And so I've listed 3 techniques that you can practice at home with your children that will help diffuse some of the tension and stress. And so I mentioned deep breathing before, how my mother taught me her deep breathing skill when I was young. This one just is a typical breathe in for 6 seconds, hold the breath for 6 seconds, and then slowly release it for 6 seconds. There's also what's called the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. And then, so when you get in a stressful situation, stop and ask your child to identify 5 things they can see, 4 they can hear, 3 they can feel, 2 they can smell, and 1 thing they can taste. And then being able to imagine their favorite place. And I've listed a link here for more techniques to try with kids. So I hope you can go do that. And so I'm looking at the time, and we've spent a lot of time on stress so far. And so what I'll do with this section really quickly is walk through anxiety and when you need to pay a little closer attention here. Okay, so we talked about this slide earlier. And all anxieties have one thing in common, and that's the persistent excessive fear or worry about situations that are not actually threatening. And so, if you have this sustained focus on the future and feeling of dread, and you're observing these symptoms of stress in your children for longer, and it's becoming less situational and more focused on what might happen in the future, then that's time when anxiety might be creeping in. So this is, it becomes less aware of what you're anxious about, but the reaction becomes the problem. Lots of needless worry. You may observe your child in a panic attack that can last, anywhere up to 30 minutes or so. And it's definitely a sign of anxiety where they could be sweating and breathing and hyperventilating and really agitated. And that's a sign that you need to get more help. And then I liked this tool, and so I included it here. Mental Health America has a lot of screening tools, kind of just some easy little questions to ask yourself about different types of conditions. And so they have one for anxiety. So I'm interested in seeing your thoughts there when you go take a look at it. Included in here is different types, or the most common types of anxiety. I mentioned that my daughter was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder when she was 12. And it's all consuming, and it's a general anxiety about almost everything. And her anxiety, she had panic attacks, and she had terrible, terrible headaches that we could not find the cause for. But we treated her with, with a neurologist and with a therapist at that point in time. Social anxiety disorder, so fear of social interaction, being very unsure of yourself in public, being worried about how others perceive you. Panic disorder is exactly what it is many panic attacks. And there's strong physical symptoms. I've had friends that have had such anxiety as adults that they thought they were having a heart attack or a heart problem. They've wound up in the emergency room, and it's really been a reaction to stress, ongoing stress and anxiety. And then phobias, and that might be what we might be used to hearing. Different types of phobias that produce an irrational or strong fear. NAMI is, the group that I believe can help point you in towards a resource. If you feel like you need to talk about your concerns or find what's the next steps. So there's lots of information here where there's a helpline with NAMI Wake, and these are not crisis lines. These helplines I've given, these are resource lines, and you see there's several here to choose from. NAMI Wake, NAMI North Carolina, and then NAMI National. And so depending on your location and where you are, if you're in Wake County, I suggest NAMI Wake's website and helpline. But NAMI North Carolina can help you as well. The first thing I would probably do beyond maybe calling NAMI and getting resources is really, if you have concerns over anything with your child, is schedule time with your child's primary care physician or a licensed mental health professional to talk about your concerns, and they will be able to provide you some advice and potential evaluation of your child, so you know what might be a good next step. I've also listed a few resources for you to go tool around on as well. Again, when I send this deck back around, you'll be able to click on it and go straight to the links. So I told you that was a lot of information shoved into a very little amount of time. So at this point, if there are any questions that I can answer, anything that you want to express as a comment, I'd love to hear it.
Am I unmuted?
You are, I hear you.
Oh, okay, great. This is Amy Takahashi again. So yeah, if I think I can get to the questions and answers, and I will help moderate that. That is a lot of information. And probably folks are going to need to digest that a little bit. You know, as a parent of teenagers and young adults, I look back when they were younger and I think, well, maybe I should have done things a little bit differently. But the good news is grace abounds. And I do think kids are resilient, and I'm so grateful for that.
You're right. You're right. When I first trained I started working with NAMI because I was at a point where I was ready to give back and be an advocate for mental health. And I'd gotten through probably the hardest years of my daughter's illness. And so she was diagnosed with a generalized anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, suicidal ideation, self-harm and cutting, and OCD. And, it was very, very important to be able to learn a little bit more, because in the throes of it, I didn't know how to recognize the symptoms leading up to her stresses. And obviously her situation was much more acute than the typical stress reaction. But as you know, I wish I had known about these signs earlier.
Yeah. It's so hard when you're in the thick of it to step back as the adult and to get perspective, because so often the situations with our children are just so intense, and we get drawn into those emotions and everything that they're feeling and going through as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Amy, I don't see any questions popping up tonight. I think folks are processing, and I look forward to getting all your links to click on and follow and learn a little bit more for myself. Thank you so much for sharing with us tonight. It's been great to have you, and to those who've been here, thank you for coming. And we will, certainly be having more conversations. And thank you for giving us a good starting point. So,
thank you all. Thank you all. And I appreciate it. And anytime we can, NAMI, North Carolina, and any of our programs are free, I would love to have you all tool around on the website and take a look at what free education events you can attend.
And when we aren't in the middle of a pandemic, NAMI meets at Highland frequently. So
I have taught a basics class, but I have taught also 2 online basics courses since April.
Okay.
So we've moved a lot of our support groups and a lot of our education classes online. Not the same, but we can still get together and support one another.
Yeah. Nothing's quite the same, is it?
No,
Nothing's quite the same. Well, thank you so much, Amy. And those of you who are here, thank you. And, if for those of you that we'll be sending out the links, and the link for the recording. And you know, if you've got more questions or if something occurs to you, we can pass it along. So thank you so much, and y'all have a great evening.
Thank you. God bless.
Bye.